series of questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Before I get started on my questions, I just want to start with this simple one. And this is to everyone in the chamber, not just to our witnesses. Raise your hand if you lost someone due to COVID or you know someone who lost someone due to COVID. Raise your hand. Okay, that's like the whole chamber. Okay. COVID killed 1.135 million Americans and counting. That's more Americans that were killed during the Civil War and World War II combined in a shorter period of time. Let's say we would have kept the schools open. Isn't it likely, yes, kids were not as harmed as other people, but kids are taught by teachers who may have some immunocompromised situation going on. Kids go home to parents and grandparents and aunties and uncles and live in the community and travel. So while kids may have not been seriously sick or killed by COVID, they can pass the illness on to others who will then die from COVID. This is well documented. That being said, I think it's fair to say if we would have kept schools open, more people would have died due to COVID. So we're talking here about learning loss, which is the incorrect term, by the way. The more correct term is learning disruption or disrupted learning. Because the way the brain works, it doesn't work in a way where learning is lost. That implies that you need to go find it. That implies that it's somewhere that it can't be located. Learning doesn't happen at a period of time in a vacuum and then you move on and then you can't get it back unless you go find it. It may have been disrupted, yes, because we experienced a trauma that is unprecedented in world history. And that's a word that no one has used up until this point. Trauma. I encourage you all to review an ACE study that was done in the medical field several decades ago. ACEs are adverse childhood experiences. ACEs, the study shows that toxic stress and complex trauma impacts the brain's development in people 18 years of age and younger. Look up the study. The world experienced a complex trauma, which is going to impact the brain's development, particularly the prefrontal cortex. If that has happened to our kids and then they go back to school, of course you're going to see disruptions in learning. There is another pandemic that has been going on since the beginning of American history, and that is the underinvestment and disinvestment in poor schools, in poor communities, particularly black and brown. That is a pandemic that was here way before COVID, which is why we see an achievement gap in our schools and why kids in wealthier school communities do better than other kids. And now we're having a conversation behaving as if we're really concerned about learning loss, while my colleagues on the other side of the aisle want to cut funding to Title I, to community schools, and to resources for our most vulnerable people, especially those who receive SNAP and TANF benefits. What are we talking about? We're not being honest about the full conversation here. And so if learning loss is something we really care about, and again, it's the wrong term, it's disrupted learning, we need to invest in our teachers, invest in our children, and invest in our schools and communities that have been historically neglected. And I'll close with this, and Ms. Ray, I'm going to try to give you a moment to respond to my comments. I'm sorry I went too long. But I don't know where we're getting this idea of this disrupted learning is going to lead to generations falling behind. I have a doctorate in educational leadership from Manhattanville College. I ran a middle school for 10.5 years. In 2016, my middle school had the #1 growth scores of any middle school in New York City. We moved kids from level 1 to level 3 on standardized tests at a higher rate than anyone else in New York City. We did that in 1 year. Why are we talking about generations? We need to have a conversation about how learning works and be honest about that in this committee. And I hate standardized tests, by the way. We need project-based learning and more holistic learning in our schools that includes the arts and sports and tech and things that kids actually care about and actually contribute to a 21st century economy. Sorry, my time is up. I yield back.
Thank you.